We'll just wait for the screen to switch. Okay, cool. So before I begin, I guess a question to the audience. Put your hands up if you own a driverless car. Okay, that's the end of the talk then. I guess the future is now, right? But I want you to remember the fact that I asked that question now in 2015 because I'm fairly convinced that in about 20 years, you'll probably be telling your kids or grandkids that I was at a conference once and this random guy from the UK asked this question and we all sort of laughed and nobody owned a driverless car, whereas now it's pretty much commonplace. Everyone's got one. And today, if you're not convinced about that, and I'm not trying to convince you, it's more sort of evidential today, hopefully you'll see that we are a lot closer to the reality of that. So very briefly about me and my interest here. I really hate driving. That's Grumpy Cat there, I'm Grumpy Matt. I live in central London, but my office is about 20 miles south of London, so I drive. And I like to drive because I can be inside a vehicle, so I can have the radio on, I can be warm, so I don't have to walk to a train station, that sort of thing. But ultimately, I just can't stand driving. The traffic, it takes me sometimes an hour and a half just to go 20 miles in London. And the big thing that gets me about that is just the loss of time. The time is so precious in life, and for me, like, I really dwell on that point sort of every day when I'm driving. I'm like, I wish I could be doing something else right now. There's so many other things that I would rather be doing. So for me, that's, pun intended, I guess, that's the driver for driverless cars. Other people will have other more pertinent aspects like safety, which we'll come on to. But for me, it's clawing back that time in my daily life. So this morning's journey, we'll go through the history of autonomous vehicles fairly quickly, just to understand where we've come from, what the ideas were, up to where we are today. Then I'll go through some use cases and just some general musings around the topic so we can all start to get thinking about where we're going with this technology and what the implications might be. Related to that, specifically for this audience, we'll touch on the opportunities for yourselves, for developers, because there's going to be a massive explosion in this space, I believe. We'll talk about the challenges. Inevitably, there are challenges to everything in life, but certainly driverless cars is by no means an overly easy task, so we'll talk about that. And then we'll close with some understanding of the future. And so where we are today is pretty close, but where are we heading in the next 10, 20 years? So the first driverless vehicle, I guess, was technically this guy, Leonardo da Vinci. These are some drawings for his driverless cart. The idea was it was a cart that would shift heavy goods from A to B. It was all mechanical, but it had a concept of dials and switches that could be changed to program different routes. So I guess technically this falls into the category of driverless autonomous vehicle. And this was way back in around 1478. Clever guy. So skip ahead to probably a good 500 years. It takes a while for the car to be invented and to start becoming mainstream. And then people start picking up in science fiction the idea of a driverless car. So there was this publication in the US called Air Wonder Stories, which was very sort of Jules Verne-esque in the sort of its ideas about machinery of the future. And it would touch upon the idea of driverless cars. And on the right-hand side here, you have an advert for, I think it was for an electricity advert. And the text here, I'll read it, it's very small at the bottom of the screen. Electricity may be the driver. One day your car may speed along an electric superhighway, its speed and steering automatically controlled by electronic devices embedded in the road. Travel will be more enjoyable. Highways will be made safe by electricity. No traffic jams, no collisions, no driver fatigue. And you've got a very quaint image of a family of four playing a board game while the car drives. So this is where people are starting to think about this. But the interesting thing at this point is people are thinking about the roads being the main component of driverless cars. They have some form of electricity and magnetism that guides the vehicles. But it's a start. So this is about the 1930s to the 50s. Skip ahead a bit more. This is an article from Science Digest, another USA publication. This was a real science publication talking about up-and-coming technologies. And this is where it starts to again, along the lines of a road infrastructure that steers or guides cars, but starts to talk about the actual technologies that could be used to do that, the realities of those sensing technologies coming into being in the real world. This was about 1958. And then now skip ahead to, I've got a video here from 1971 from the archives. This was from the Road Research Institute in the UK. Again, following along the lines of a road guiding the vehicle, but this is a demonstration of some of the realities that were coming about in this space.
Look, no hands, and no driver for that matter. Scientists assure us that it's the shape of things to come in highway travel. This robot car is the latest project under study by the Road Research Laboratory. It's all done by computerized electronic impulses relayed to the car through a special receiving unit fixed to the front. Signals picked up from the inlaid track are interpreted by the unit to change the car's course or its speed, rather similar to the automatic pilot system used in aircraft. Sometime in the future, they say, every vehicle on a main road network could be taken by remote control all the way to its destination. It may seem a bit of a pipe dream at the moment, but researchers say that robot cars may well be in everyday use within 30 years.
So robot cars within 30 years in 1978. I guess probably not too far off, because we're only in about 2015, and we'll get there. So jumping ahead now to the 80s and 90s. This is NavLab. This was a development through individuals belonging to Carnegie Mellon University. And there were various iterations from NavLab 1 to NavLab 90 up to 1990. And essentially, this was a massive truck full of banks of computers and multiple operators inside. And this could do maybe a maximum of 20 miles an hour. But it was a sort of a big introduction and shift in mindset to start using computers to steer the car and guide it rather than rely on a road infrastructure to do that. And we have another video here to show this.
A scanning laser rangefinder that measures 3D positions, computers to digitize and process the images, and computer-controlled steering and speed. The NavLab has software for image interpretation, including specialized modules for following dirt roads, traveling through intersections, and driving on main roads. I toss in the case of drinks, fire it up, and tell it how to drive itself to Keith's house. The 1990 model NavLab does not come standard with route planning software, so I have to look over the maps stored in the NavLab's computer and generate specific instructions on where to go and how to drive.
So we're getting closer. There's still an aspect of having to pre-program. I guess technologies like GPS still aren't overly accessible at that time, but it's a step closer. So now we'll jump forward to 2005. This car is nicknamed Stanley. This was the winner of the DARPA project, or competition rather, in that year, Defense Advanced Research Agency in the US, where they stumped up a lot of money in terms of a prize for a vehicle that could drive itself across the Mojave Desert for about 100 or so miles. And this was the winner. So we can see now that the technology is becoming a lot more condensed on the extremities of the vehicle. There's some sensing technology, but we've come from a truck to an actual vehicle now. And in the back, this is what the infrastructure looks like. So no more truckloads of infrastructure, just a more condensed rack-mounted piece of kit.
Welcome to the DARPA Grand Challenge. The objective? Create a self-navigating, autonomous vehicle that can safely drive 132 miles through a harsh desert environment without human intervention. Yes, these are robot cars, and if you've ever wanted to see the future, take a good look, because it's right in front of you. The technology we see here will be used in the military within the next few years, and eventually, robots like these may be taking you to and from work. But it's not easy. 43 teams from around the country began with dreams of building a robot capable of conquering this course. Only 23 teams earned the right to run in the $2 million DARPA Grand Challenge Final.
So, as an outcome of those big competitions, jump forward to 2009, Google announced them going formally into a program of research and development in driverless cars. And I think a number of people involved in the DARPA projects were sort of taken into Google and became part of the team to work on these technologies. So here's a picture of one of the first Google Toyotas. And just to show, again, the condensement of equipment, this is the computer that was driving that back in 2009. So we've gone from something incredibly massive in a truck right down to essentially a desktop computer. That was in the Google Prius in 2010. Jump forward to 2012, Google moved to Alexis, and trials in there, but the key thing here is the technology has gone even smaller. So I find this incredible, but it's a really good illustration of how far we've come with the technology. And here we are today, 2015. So this is Google's bubble car. I don't know if that's the actual word for it, but very sort of cute driverless car, to the point that they've dispensed with a steering wheel. There's just 2 seats in there. And we'll see some videos of this shortly in operation. So where we are now, just to give you an example of the mindsets of the key people who are driving these technologies. This is Elon Musk talking about autonomous vehicles and driverless cars and what they're trying to achieve with Tesla. And it's just a good example of how that mindset is really pushing for these technologies to become a reality.
About autonomous cars, because that's sort of like a narrow form of AI. And it's not something that I think is very difficult, actually. I think to do autonomous driving to a degree that's much safer than a person is much easier than people think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think it's going to just become normal. Like it'll be like an elevator. Like they used to have elevator operators, and then we developed some simple circuitry to have elevators just automatically come to the floor that you're at, and you can just press the button. Nobody needs to operate the elevator. The car is just going to be like that.
And the elevators these days are even smart. I mean, it knows where to position an elevator, so that if you were to need an elevator, it's pretty close to you. Cars in the future will be pretty smart about that too.
Yeah, you'll be able to tell your car, like, take me home, go here, go there, anything, and it'll just do it.
Now, you guys,
at an order of magnitude safer than a person. In fact, in the distant future, I think it's probably going to be, if people may outlaw driving cars because it's too dangerous. Like you can't have a person driving a 2-ton death machine.
So there's 2 real interesting aspects coming out of that. It's the convenience thing, the change in life and how we travel, but also the safety angle, which is a very big push that we're starting to see now coming from the manufacturers. And it's a valid point around the danger of driving. There are about 1.2 million road deaths every year, and there's lots of thought around how driverless cars will really help to address that, to bring that number way down. So yeah, it's fascinating. So let's see what else is going on right now this year. This is from The Guardian. Uber was spotted doing some stuff around driverless cars. Here's a picture of somebody papped on the streets. The text on the vehicle there says Uber Advanced Technology Center, but clearly there's something interesting going on top there of the vehicle. And then from an article, there's some quotes here from Travis Kalanick, Uber CEO, where his ambition, he's thinking sort of way ahead. He wants every car in San Francisco to be an Uber. So his thought is that people in cities like San Francisco won't need cars. There just needs to be a fleet of autonomous vehicles just available that you request via your app. You go from your source to destination, you jump out, and that goes back into the fleet. And again, his perspective is giving back time every day, fewer cars, less congestion, less pollution, creation of jobs as well to an extent. And then Apple. So there are always rumors around what Apple might be doing or not doing in various technology spaces. But in driverless cars, there was a letter, I think, leaked to The Guardian or somehow went to The Guardian around Apple asking to use a driverless facility in California. The letters have referenced their requirement to book it to do some tests around autonomous driving. And this is the area in, I think it's about 30 miles northeast of San Francisco. It's a place called Gomentum, and industry can sort of hire it and use it to test various vehicles, sort of driverless vehicles. It's got about 20 or 30 miles worth of sort of blocks and streets that's being sort of heavily used to test the technologies in this space. And in terms of the car manufacturers, so there's some big statements coming out from there as well. Here's a quote from Nissan's CEO. As we work to bring vehicles with autonomous drive to the market by 2020, so only about 4 years away, we're incorporating this technology in our vehicles and introducing its benefits on a progressive basis. Similarly with Ford, they've appointed a director of autonomous vehicle development, and they claim that they're a step closer to production, going from research into advanced engineering. So, in terms of the experience of a driverless car, so I've got 2 videos here from this year, one from Tesla, one from Google. And this helps illustrate a few things. One, the 2 different types of driverless car that we're probably going to see in the very near future, sort of in operation. You've got the concept of semi-autonomous and fully. So semi being, you'll still have a steering wheel. There may be only periods in a journey where the car will be allowed to go into driverless mode, maybe when you're just on a motorway and you're just driving for hundreds of miles. But it might be that the car doesn't allow you within sort of urban areas. So Tesla have developed a thing called, technology called autopilot, which they have in some of their vehicles sort of in development now. On Google's side, however, they've dispensed with a steering wheel. So they're really pushing for the completely driverless experience. When I play these videos, a good thing to do is to sort of really appreciate the reactions from the people from those experiences. Like they're fascinating to me from a sort of psychology perspective. But again, it'll be good to look at this now and maybe think back in 10, 20 years' time around how funny it is that we had these feelings, how I guess the driverless aspect is going to become so normal to us in a very short space of time. So it's all about, do we want some level of control or no control in driverless cars?
Yeah, no, the car's watching. It sees, oh my gosh, the car knows exactly where the person ahead of me is in the lane, because I can see it here on the dash, and, oh, red light. But that was, ooh, that was interesting. It got a really bad taxi really well, which is incredible. And oh my gosh, this is so, I'm not touching it at all, and it's driving, whoa, the lanes are getting a little, oh no, there it goes, and it stops. I mean, being here in a Tesla Model S P90D with ludicrous mode, which is incredibly fun, but the fact that it could do all this itself, and you could see on here the vehicle in front of you that's following, and you could see where that is in its lane, and you could see all of the sensors going back and forth on the dashboard display here. Oh my gosh, it's changing lanes on its own. Oh my gosh, it's changing lanes on its own. That is wild. So I hit the brakes there, but I didn't think I need to. I think that was me getting nervous, and the car didn't have a problem. The car was like, just watch out, there's something in front, but it was slowing down on its own. That's incredible. That's weird that I started freaking out before the car did. Gosh.
So yeah, I'm sure we're all going to sort of have a similar experience in the next few years as these cars start coming on the market. And now for Google's sort of first drive experience.
Today, we have something extra special for you guys, and you guys will be some of the first people outside of our team and outside of Google to ever ride in it.
Oh, there it is. Oh, isn't that cute?
Go ahead and buckle up.
Okay, There's no steering wheel in the way.
It was a big decision for us to go and start building our purpose-built vehicles for this. And really, they're prototype vehicles. They were a chance for us to explore what does it really mean to have a self-driving vehicle. But in the small amount of time we've been working on it, we have functional prototypes, and that's exciting.
It's really cool. It was like really kind of a space age experience.
Okay. Hooray. We're like queens. Yeah.
You said relax. You don't need to do nothing. It knows when it needs to stop. It knows when it needs to go.
It actually rides better than my own car.
Yes, sure.
What she really liked was that it slowed down before it went around a curve and then accelerated
In the
the
curve.
curve. She's always trying to get me to do it that way.
That's the way I learned in a high school driver's ed.
So if I had a self-driving car, I could spend more time hanging out with my kids or helping them with their homework, even just tending to them, finding out how their day was and not having to wait till you get home and have dinner and all that. So it'll be good.
Human feeling of it is very well engineered and it is very smooth. There's nothing that makes you feel the least bit threatened. It's impressive. I'm totally in love with this whole concept.
Our lives are made up of lots and lots of little things. And a lot of those little things for most people have to do with getting from place to place in order to connect and do things, be with people, go places that they need to go and do things. And so there's a big part of my life that's missing, and there's a big part of my life that a self-driving vehicle would bring back to me.
This is the first step for us, and it's really exciting to see the progress we've made. The opportunity for people to just move around and not worry about it, it's going to be incredibly empowering and incredibly powerful for people.
I love this.
So for those interested, Google now publish a monthly report. I think if you Google it, you'll get the link. And that's where they're giving all the statistics about sort of new aspects of the research around safety, their progress with the technology. It's really interesting stuff to read. I just wanted to segue very briefly into something which is related, and this is V2V, or vehicle-to-vehicle communication. So I think this is important to understand because this will be part of the facilitation of driverless cars into our infrastructures. And this is where vehicles will have inbuilt technology to transmit information about their speed and position to other vehicles in ways that hopefully the cars can preempt if they're going to collide, or understand if there's something coming around the corner that maybe the driver wouldn't be able to see. And I think this will be quite key in that moment where we have driverless and drivered cars in operation at the same time. And the US are sort of pushing to possibly get this into legislation, almost to a point where they're mandating that as of maybe next year, vehicle manufacturers will have to have this technology inbuilt into all new models of their vehicles.
The driver is about to slam on his brakes. We can't see it, but this car can, alerting the driver to the danger ahead before he can even react. Vehicle-to-vehicle communication is on the cutting edge of automotive technology, and according to the Department of Transportation, it has the potential to prevent up to 80% of accidents that aren't caused by drunk driving or mechanical failure.
It is the promise of advanced safety technology delivered.
On Monday, the government announced that by 2016, it will likely require all new cars to carry V2V technology.
It is the game-changing potential to avoid a crash in the first place.
The technology allows cars to communicate wirelessly, transmitting their speed and position. It gives drivers another pair of eyes in blind spots and around corners before accidents.
So 2016, the possible mandate for that sort of technology. Everything I've talked about so far has been mainly US-based, so just to cap that off, this is from a report done in the UK about driverless cars. This is just interesting to see how different states have had legislation passed to allow for driverless vehicles within those states. So it's legal to have a driverless car in California, for example. And I thought this was interesting in the context of yesterday's keynote by David Anderson, where he talked about early adopters of agile and sort of the correlation between liberal societies and trust. And he talked about how sort of coastal areas of the US were sort of into that category. And you sort of see a correlation here with the sort of mindset of driverless cars and getting that legislation passed to help make that technology a reality. So that was US. Is it happening elsewhere? So I'm from the UK. What's happening there? There is some stuff going on. I think we've got a short video coming up about that. But again, just to sort of show the level of investment in this, Innovate UK is sort of a government-type body which issues out public money, taxpayers' money, to fund various research projects. And this is from this year, an award of up to £20 million to stimulate developments in autonomous vehicles and connected transport systems. So big investment coming from many angles, not just from industry.
It will be using live sensor data, and it will be comparing the view it gets from its cameras and its lasers as it's running through the world to what its memory of that place should look like. And if it can make that match up, it knows where it is.
This particular project is really a technology test bed. Assuming that we can develop the technology and allow these vehicles to operate in this environment, then I think there's a vision that we would have lots of these vehicles providing really reliable transport to get people from A to B.
So that was from one of the trials being done in the UK. There's a few cities, Milton Keynes, Greenwich in London, Bristol, that all have different trials going on. I think a lot of that research has been funded by some of these research fund initiatives. So in the UK, they've published recently, there's this summary report and a much bigger full-length one by the Department for Transport, looking through all aspects of driverless cars, right up to a roadmap of where we're heading within the UK and what needs to happen to make these technologies a reality. And this is from that report, just a very high-level project plan, I guess, or timeline for the development of highly and fully automated vehicles. So we see here in about 2015 down the middle, there's various activities have happened around a code of practice for public road testing, review of UK domestic regulations, various standards. We love standards in the UK, but it's good to get them done out of the way now, I guess. But looking at end of 2018 at the bottom here, probably can't quite see, but that says production of highly and fully automated road vehicles. So on this plan by the Department for Transport, they reckon that production is going to be happening in just a couple of years' time. And what about Sweden? Since we're here, be rude not to understand what's going on here. And there are some things happening. Volvo have a scheme or a piece of, I guess, research that they'll be doing in 2017. And here's a video to show that.
In 2017, Volvo Cars will put 100 self-driving cars on the streets of Gothenburg in Sweden, with real customers in the driver's seat. The unique Drive Me project is a part of Volvo Cars' journey towards a crash-free future. Volvo has now designed a complete system solution. Multiple radars, cameras, a laser, and ultrasonic sensors monitor the complete 360 view of the surroundings. A network of computers processes the information, high-performance GPS, and a cloud-based 3D digital map, continuously updated with real-time changes in the traffic environment. If anything fails, there is a backup solution, just like in an aeroplane. This includes vital components such as computers, sensors, steering, and brakes. On the road, the car is able to handle even the most complicated scenarios. The technology is so reliable that the driver can focus on something else without having to pay attention to the traffic. Just like good drivers, potentially critical situations are approached with sensible caution. And in an emergency, the car reacts faster than most humans. When autonomous driving is no longer available due to exceptional weather situations, technical malfunction, or reaching the end of the route, the driver is prompted to take over again. If the driver doesn't take over in time, the car will bring itself to a safe stop. With the Drive Me project, Volvo enters uncharted territory in the field of self-driving cars. Taking the final step to driving safely in real traffic with ordinary people behind the wheel has never been done before. And for drivers, the everyday commute transforms from lost time to quality time, open for work or pleasure. The choice is entirely yours.
So I read an article yesterday how Australia are about to embark on their own trials, and I could just talk all day, I guess, for how these pockets of new research and innovation are just happening around the world to realize driverless cars. Okay, so use cases and musings. There's a lot to think about in terms of how we take this to the next step and what we have to understand and consider. Use cases. We can do other things while the car drives. I said at the start that's my main motivation for wanting one of these, and that's going to be a massive change to our lifestyles and the way that we live. Possibly, depending on how we'll be allowed to operate driverless cars, if you don't physically have to be inside the vehicle, you might be able to dispatch it to go and pick somebody up. For example, you might not need to physically be in the car to go pick your kids up from school. Maybe the car will just go fetch them and bring them back. It's feasible. Or maybe you need to deliver something to someone. So rather than you having to make that journey, you stick the thing in the vehicle and it goes off and delivers. And I haven't touched on today autonomous vehicles in the transport space, sort of heavy goods vehicles, but just be aware that similar efforts are happening there on a truck level. And I guess just consider the implications there of not having to have drivers who need to take breaks on long drives. You could conceivably have lorries just driving non-stop, getting deliveries to people much quicker because they're driverless. Military applications, so there could be a number of ways that you could harness the fact that you don't need a driver in vehicles for deployment in war zones to take goods or medicines to people, or times of natural disaster. You might conceivably dispatch whole fleets of vehicles to go to various parts and different people. Servicing. I mean, a driverless car will still need to be serviced. You know, it will need repair work now and again. You can perfectly imagine that the car will just happily transmit its diagnostics data back to a local garage and just book itself in for a service and drive itself there, and then bring itself back when it's been fixed. No need to be with that vehicle anymore. And at destination, so this is sort of in line with Uber's vision. You don't technically need to park anymore. Suppose you're going for a night out to a restaurant or to the theater. The car will drop you off, but you don't have to go and park somewhere and then walk to your venue or destination. The car will go off and park itself somewhere, and then when you're ready, you just request it to come pick you up through your car app or whatever. So it's going to be a big change in how we live our lives from that perspective. It's going to be more accessible. People like, people who are disabled, possibly even children. I guess this is going to become more of a legislation aspect rather than a technology issue. At what age do we allow children to ride on their own in a driverless car? Something to think about. Precision driving. This is something interesting where, because of the technologies will be so finely tuned, and vehicle-to-vehicle comms, all that sort of stuff, you can get probably many more vehicles into the same or fewer number of lanes by driving very closely to each other. So you could revolutionize how we use the roads at the moment, because they could do that sort of in safety and get much better level of precision than any human driver could get without risk of collision. And alcohol consumption, right? So drink driving is a big issue. It's pretty much illegal everywhere. But what happens now if there's no steering wheel? Can I drink and the car drive me? Again, this is probably going to have to be something that legislators think about, but it might be that we are able to drink and go home in our driverless cars at some point in safety. And accessibility. So this is something I was chatting to Ben the other night around this, and I threw this point in because it was an important point that he raised around, will this technology just be quite niche and only available to a select few people? You know, is it going to be ridiculously expensive? And I guess also, how might that affect certain economies that rely on sort of taxis and taxi drivers? So there's a lot of thought required in that area around the sort of socio-economic impact of driverless cars. And what about insurance, right? So maybe you still need insurance for damage, but if the safety aspects are to be believed, the safety benefits, do I need to worry about insurance of injuring other people anymore? Possibly not. Maybe my premiums will now go right down. So we'll move into some challenges now. There will always be a level of sort of negativity or devil's advocacy against new technologies like this around how they could go wrong or when they would go wrong. And the topic, well, I'll come on to it. I'm jumping ahead of myself. First of all, challenges weather. I think it has been reported that Google have had issues around, adverse weather. But obviously, they have mainly been using and developing in sunny California, so not so much of an issue. But places like Sweden, during winter, maybe the vehicles just won't be effective. So can you get to a point where you have fully autonomous vehicles in adverse weather conditions? That's a big question. Security. So this is my field, and I usually talk at conferences talking about sort of the doom and gloom and all the vulnerabilities that I find in products and systems, but I'm not going to dwell on that today, but it needs to be mentioned. All these cars will be connected to the internet. They'll all be communicating with each other. How secure are all those inputs and outputs? Can they be hacked? Can they be stolen if they're hacked? Can they be reprogrammed to do malicious things? Can I flash the firmware to make them drive into people? If I can think about that, if I can have that idea, then guaranteed somebody else will, and will try and realize that, probably for malicious purposes. So security is going to be a big deal. Artificial intelligence and machine learning will be creeping into driverless cars as they try and refine their algorithms and learn about different behaviors on the roads. There is the potential that maybe they'll learn bad behaviors, not intentionally, but for some reason, some aspect of how people cross roads, it might mean that over time the algorithms develop in sort of a bad, unsafe way. So that's something to consider. Change in industry, there's big shouting around the massive explosion and creation of jobs, which is great, particularly in the tech sort of engineering communities. But there's also the understanding of loss of jobs. So taxi drivers, maybe Uber drivers no longer required, lorry drivers, maybe within the insurance sector, a lot of insurance companies might not be making as much money as the technology progresses. So again, socioeconomic issues we need to be appreciative of at least. And then morality and liability. So we're now entrusting a vehicle to take us from A to B, and at some point there could conceivably be an accident or requirement for a vehicle to make a sudden decision. Maybe it's going to hit a pedestrian and I can't control that. If that happens, who's responsible? Is it the driver or the owner? The pedestrian? Is it the car manufacturer, or something else, or some permutation of that? And that's still, I guess, essentially a bit of a gray area. So from a morality perspective, there's this term algorithmic morality, and there's these three scenarios which people are asked to go through when thinking about this and what the implications are for driverless cars. In scenario A, a driverless car is about to hit a bunch of pedestrians, maybe 10 or so, and it can either turn right and hit one pedestrian or drive through them. What does it do? Does it just possibly kill one or possibly kill 10? In B there's maybe just one person ahead of you, nobody to your left or right. The car needs to decide, do I possibly kill that individual or do I kill the passenger by driving into a wall? And this is really interesting in that how cars will tackle this issue. Will they give you, as the consumer, the choice? I guess I'll ask now, they're quite uncomfortable questions. If we look at scenario B, if you had a choice of a car that would favor either killing or potentially killing people in front of you or killing you, what would you prefer? Hands up if you prefer a car that would kill the other person. Oh my God. I guess hands up if you'd rather the car kill yourselves. Well, that's interesting. Fewer people. Tough crowd. But it's fascinating because at some point you can imagine that your life could depend on a simple if statement in a piece of code. Just think about that. To put some context around this, though, this is a brilliant thought experiment, but I think what it doesn't account for is how the various technologies in driverless cars are much better than just a human driver. They have a lot more foresight and insight and predictability. So I think while this is good, I think it's likely that we will see not that much issue around people running out into the road and driverless cars having to make these difficult decisions. And in terms of liability, this has been a big game changer, I guess. This bold statement by Volvo, Google, and Mercedes, they all have announced that they will accept responsibility for self-driving car collisions. That's a massive thing to do, and that will probably force other manufacturers to go into that space. So opportunity. This is a slide that's for you. As I've been researching this field, what I've learned to understand is that driverless cars is a software problem. So by problem, I don't mean something that can't be solved. I mean from a mathematical sense, here's something that we want to try and solve. We have solved it. There are driverless cars. But it's a software thing. It's you lot out there who will be involved in taking this concept or this idea to the next step. And because of what do I mean by that? Well, if you think about what's happening now, you've got real-time processing and data analysis, artificial intelligence, machine learning, pattern matching, big data, comms and telematics, various apps to interact with your vehicles. We've had cars for a long time. You know, this isn't an engineering problem now. This is purely number crunching and software. So a big opportunity for this room. And to demonstrate that, this is a video of Chris Urmson, the director of the Google car project, giving an illustration of what the Google car sees, and this sort of shows the algorithmic decisions and the inputs and outputs that it's receiving and how it's processing those in how it makes its decisions as it drives.
This is what our system looked like. So you can see our car in the middle, the other boxes on the road driving down the highway. The car needs to understand where it is and roughly where the other vehicles are. It's really a geometric understanding of the world. Once we started driving on neighborhoods and city streets, the problem becomes a whole new level of difficulty. You see pedestrians crossing in front of us, cars crossing in front of us, going every which way, the traffic lights, crosswalks. It's an incredibly complicated problem by comparison. And then once you have that problem solved, the vehicle has to be able to deal with construction. So here the cones on the left are forcing it to drive to the right, but not just construction in isolation, of course. It has to deal with other people moving through that construction zones as well. And of course, if anyone's breaking the rules, the police are there. And the car has to understand that that flashing light on the top of the car means that it's not just a car, it's actually a police officer. Similarly, the orange box on the side here, it's a school bus. And we have to treat that differently as well. When we're out on the road, other people have expectations. So when a cyclist puts up their arm, it means they're expecting the car to yield to them and make room for them to make a lane change. And when a police officer stood in the road, our vehicle should understand that this means stop, and when they signal to go, we should continue. Now, the way we accomplish this is by sharing data between the vehicles. The first kind of most crude model of this is when one vehicle sees a construction zone, having another know about it so it can be in the correct lane to avoid some of the difficulty. But we actually have much deeper understanding than this. We can take all of the data that the cars have seen over time, the hundreds of thousands of pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles that have been out there, and understand what they look like, and use that to infer what other vehicles should look like and other pedestrians should look like. And then, even more importantly, we can take from that a model of how we expect them to move through the world. So here the yellow box is a pedestrian crossing in front of us. Here the blue box is a cyclist, and we anticipate they're going to nudge out and around the car to the right. Here there's a cyclist coming down the road, and we know they're going to continue to drive down the shape of the road. Here, somebody makes a right turn, and in a moment here, somebody's going to make a U-turn in front of us, and we can anticipate that behavior and respond safely. Now that's all.
So I'll just say it once more, that driverless cars is a software problem. Cool, nearly there. So the future. Some statements or ideas put out by the companies involved. Google want cars available to consumers by 2017. So that's only just a little over a year away. Tesla, they want passengers to be able to sleep while the car drives by 2019. All these big names in automotive, they all expect to have at least semi-autonomous vehicles for purchase by 2020, 4 years away. And lastly, a concept car by Mercedes. So this doesn't exist in terms of all its features that you're about to see, but this is their sort of genuine vision of where the driverless car might go in the not too distant future. Man, I really want one of those. Okay, so just to finish quickly, too many people die every year, usually as a result of alcohol, particularly in the US. Driverless cars will be safer and more accessible to disabled or people who don't have driver licenses already. In London in 2006 alone, the CO2 emissions was like 9.6 million tons. So smaller, lighter electric cars, autonomous vehicles will have no emissions. So you have an improved health aspect to life. Passengers can do other things. Again, this is what I want. But ultimately, just an overall improved quality of life. Happy people. Thank you very much.